I'm not sure if it was a surprise for you, but for me it was a surprise. Sim update number 3 beta was already directly available after sim update number 2. In this video we're gonna look at the 3 builds, yes you heard correctly, already 3 builds released for this new sim update. But first, let's roll the intro. Three builds in 8 days time. That's a lot, right? That's what we are not used to. Normally there's one sim update beta version per week, sometimes 2. In this case there were already 3 builds, and we start with the version 1.5.1.0, which was the initial build. That one focused mostly on new content and features, right? There are no specific details found in the release notes, but there are some specific new things, such as the downloadable option to download the content. That was one of the greatest additions, which everybody was looking for. Besides that, there was a focus on stability and improvements, because there were some small, let's say, bug fixes for some specific issues. And also, of course, some issues with, I would say, general bug fixes. For example, installation issues, graphical issues, and backwards compatibility issues. But most of them were for the aircraft and for the systems. And we will have a look at those details in a few minutes. And of course, there was more. There was also more for the marketplace, the multiplayer and VR controls, as also the peripherals, right? The peripherals, we know it's a nightmare. We know that configuring them, I recorded and published multiple videos about it, and they are watched a lot, and a lot of people are happy with it. So I will keep posting those new videos as they come. And it looks like that Asobo and Microsoft has also taken this seriously and are now also working on their end to make it better. Besides that, of course, we've got the VR improvements, which are also introduced in sim update number 2, but now will also be, let's say, further developed in sim update number 3. On the 21st of May, there was that second build already, which bumped the version to version 1.5.2.0. Again, we're going to briefly touch on this, and then we're going to dive into the details after we discuss the 3 builds, because I figured out that some people are only interested in the summary, while some other people are more interested in literally the details of what's fixed in the update. So in the second build, there was also time again for new content and new features, of course, but it was more building on, I would say, the first build of this sim update, as well as some other things which they figured out. For example, there were a lot of bug fixes for the electronic flight bag, which has got a major, I'd say, improvement in sim update number 2. And in those scenarios, you will also see that it will cause some issues, because with new features, there will be, I would say, a higher chance that new issues will be discovered. Besides that, there's the ATC and even the career mode improvements, which are there. And then there was some dev mode, I would say, functionality, but as always, we're not going to go into that. Besides that, there were the world and airport updates, right, which are part of this update. And there were some, I would say, fixes for the airport, and as mainly the scenery, which is not always 100% correct. That's the part which I focused on for the second build. And of course the smoother experience, such as fix for the traffic, again virtual reality, and the controls, of course. Then the latest build, which was released this Friday, it bumped up the version to version 1.5.3.0. There were only, I would say, 3 major categories: stability and performance, targeted fixes, for example for specific aircraft physics and flight systems, as well as the traffic and the dev mode, which received some updates. So with that, we now have a short summary. Let's dive into the details. So the first one is version 1.5.1.0. This was the first release, and I would say, as Asobo mentioned in their development video or development stream last Wednesday, I think it was, they said, okay, hey, we're keeping these, I would say, leaderboards separate for beta and for the official build. So I would say, I do think that this will likely be, I would say, continuously being added to the release notes. In addition to that, it's really important, if you're having a lot of content in your community folder, if you're having issues, then move it out and try again, because it could result in some issues. So what's available? New content and features. There's of course a lot of new filters in the control settings menu. That's, I would say, almost a must-have, because filtering in the control menu was not that easy, and we'll have a look at that in a later video. Also, they added the loading spinner when the aircraft was loading. In my case, it loads pretty fast, but I can imagine that if it needs to download content and your internet connection is not that fast, that it might take longer. In addition to that, they do not display the heliport port markers when flying a plane. They did hide it. Makes sense, right? Why are you showing them? Because we can't use them with the plane. If we look at the stability and performance, there were a lot of fixes. For example, they fixed a crash on the Xbox on boot when too many packages are loaded, but they also fixed a crash which occurred sometimes on the Xbox during boot if the application is suspended. Right, with the Xbox you can suspend the app and then continue the app. In some scenarios it caused some issues. Besides that, they optimized the boot and loading times, and that's something which you can really almost measure, right? It's really super fast now loading. The question is, will it remain like this, or will it, be a temporary fix and then will increase loading times again? Then also besides that, they looked at the reduction of the VRAM consumption. VRAM consumption, if you search on the internet, you will find a lot of VRAM, discussions. It looks like that they're not trying to optimize it further. And in addition to that, they fixed crash on the boot if the content XML was invalid XML, which makes sense, right? In that case, they will reset it. And they fixed a potential crash. Potential crash could be anything. Besides that, they optimized the cabin service not loading to open the same file several times, which also could cause, of course, some stability and performance issues. So pretty interesting issues, but if you look further, and if you already see this list of general bug fixes, you can see that it is crazy long. They fix crashes, they fix issues where the live traffic or multiplayer traffic could have the wrong icon. They fixed vehicle parking spots cannot be selected on the world map anymore. They removed the moonlight atmosphere scattering caused by the incorrect moon direction, resolved low resolution quality. They fixed the ambulance light spawning while the model is not visible, and a lot of other fixes. It simply is too long to go to all these fixes. You will see that some of them are simply graphical fixes, such as, city markers not visible, right? That doesn't like to have a huge impact on you if you're flying, but there were also some things where it really would impact your, experience in Flight Simulator 2020. For example, the issue where in some replies the ATC could be cropped or invisible. That is kind of important if you're trying to communicate with the ATC, right? If we're scrolling down, we will find more things such as the install and performance for the graphics. So the exposure bias parameter is now available on the Xbox, which is good. And there's a frame rate limiter, which has now been renamed to the VSync interval. This is specifically for those who are playing on the PC version, right? There was a frame rate limiter that has now been renamed to the VSync interval. So make that, keep it in mind, I should say. Add the ability to cap the frame rate via a new setting in the options menu. So you can now cap your frame rate. For example, if you don't cap it, then it will try to maximize it, but you can also cap it to, for example, 30 frames per second. That also has an impact on the dev mode, visual, right, where you can measure the frames per second, because I already played with it. And if you cap the video frame rate, you will see that it's, less likely that it will become completely red. Then some backwards compatibility issues. The FX brightness has been fixed, as well as overall the loading of bitmaps found in 2010 or 2020 packages, that have been properly compiled through the package builder. So those are now, fixed. Then we're coming to the aircrafts, and this list, I would say, if you thought that Sim update number 2 did contain a lot of fixes, well, then hold your horses, because Sim update number 3 is even bigger. You can see a lot of things like issues where the product capacity specification would be displayed as 0, but also the roof lights improvements for the strobe lights, taxi lights, the spotlights bounces increased on the multiple aircrafts, right? The C208B, Cabri, the DA62 and the H125. They introduced a new new rendering system for aircraft flares, so that's really important. And they also added support for multiple ball indicators used to improve physics, which can be set in a cockpit config file. This is more for developers, which can benefit from that. Then also the aircraft configurator camera position has been tweaked to let the whole aircraft, essentially the nose be in the windows, and the aircraft configurator camera is not impacted anymore by very big bounding spheres, as well as they fixed the red G effect. So that was some generic fixes. Then of course we've got the specific fixes for the specific aircrafts, and those are being, let's say, done both by Asobo as well as the developers of those aircrafts. For some of them they're really big, for some of them they're a little bit smaller. For the air tractor, for example, there was a lot of flickering in it. They fixed it, and also they fixed the spotlight rotation and the massive mesh of spotlight. If we jump further down with the list, we can see also fixes for the Airbus helicopter, the airship industry skyship, but also the Boeing 737 MAX 8. This one is likely being used by a lot of people and it contains a lot of fixes. For example, the FMS flight path calculation now supports flyover fixes. So besides fixes, they also add new functionality. For example, also some new liveries if you want to try them out. Or maybe you want to have the added realistic spool up times when setting off. We're setting takeoff thrust, sorry. So this also, they are nice things. I wouldn't call them fixes, but more optimizations. Then scrolling down the list, we find, let's say, so much fixes. Fixed the tooltip issue, fixed icing LODs, added navigation lights with flares effects, modified the lights placements to adjust flares position. So likely these two things are already benefiting from that new functionality which they mentioned in the general section. I do expect that more aircraft will start to benefit from it, I would say, the coming weeks, months. The Cessna, I would say, probably the most stable aircraft, still receives some updates. In this case, they fixed some coloring on the liveries, and the emissive intensity of panels decals increased. That daylight has been fixed. For the normal Skyhawk, they also fixed some things like the altimeter, 2 strip numbers position, improvement navigation lights. The ball indicator has new physics, which also being introduced in this package, and they correlated fuselage to get the right amount of drag in side slip. Then also the Cessna 208B Grand Caravan EX, a lot of things. There were some issues with the skydive door no longer opens when using the skydive light switch. We had manual interaction to open the sky door. They also fixed some liveries. They fixed the skydiver seatbelts clipping outside the aircraft, and also some sun visors flickering when looking at from the outside the plane. As well as the light position adjusted for the flares, plus navigation lights no longer orientate to the ground. So some good things, also some issues for the I would say checklist which were fixed. So nice. Cupcrafter, intensity of the lights and fixed liveries, nice. The Avalanche, also a lot of fixes, no new functionality. So specifically for the daylight, there were some fixes, but also the inverted ADF bearing arrows, navigation white added on tail, plus navigation lights no longer orientate to the ground, and a lot of fixes for the LODs, aircraft disappearing, floating parts which were disappearing. So some cool things. Then the DG Aviation, DG 1001, tooltip fixes and flickering issues, makes sense. Diamond DA62, again, lightning, adaptive logo, and navigation white rotation modified. The extra ER330 LT also fixes for the flickering, both I would say the interior as well as the texturing, and they corrected the engine performance. So also, if you experience, I would say, issues, or if you observe issues with the engines, you think that they're using incorrect parameters, then report it to Asobo, because you can see that they will have a look at it and will fix it. Navigation lights also move to adjust the flares positions, as well as they corrected the maximum lift and stall angle of attack. That's AOA stand for. Helicopter, the Gumbo Cabri G2 fixed some missing things on the checklist, fixed some tooltips, floating seam texture in the cockpit, updated all livery palettes, and fixed some issues with livery text. Then the Hard Aerospace, also a nice aircraft. Several fixes like the emergency door visual issue, deleted speed hold useless button, made aircraft compliant with ferry flight activity, and they added missing checkpoints for gust lock control. Other than that, there's some, I would say, fixing the liveries and on the logos. The hot air balloon, if you love to fly the air balloon, there are some fix for you. The temperature monitor screen brightness being too dark is low light. Simply, but say, resulting in that you can't read the display, and fixed a few gauges, only looking at the first tank view quality to display their needle at the right position. So that's a lot of fixes, right? But there are more, right? Because there also are some aircraft core system things. For example, they added a new version of the fuel system to fix an issue which caused some setups to potentially cause freezes. So this really, I would say, a nice one if you say experience this one. And for the glass cockpits, there's the fly safe temperature monitor, right? To fix the timer display. Now displays minutes and seconds when timer's under 3600 seconds. And else it will display the hours and the minutes when above. For the G-1000 NXI, awesome fixes, especially, I'd say specifically in this case, for the autopilot. Interesting. Glide slope tracking, stability when the airplane is close to runway. That indeed sometimes had some issues. And the FMS flight path calculation now supports flyover fixes. Nice. The Garmin G3000 and 5000, you will likely see some, let's say, similar fixes because you can see the improved autopilot, you can see the FMS flight path, but there's also a specific fix for this one, which is the fixed issue where the CDI auto slew function would not trigger correctly when loading into a flight with a localizer already tuned. The Garmin G3X Touch, similar fixes compared to the G1000 NXI. The GNS 430 and 530, also a lot of fixes. Inverted the V and the C decals, players unable to enter waypoints, improved the autopilot again. They fixed an issue where the airplanes with a manually adjustable heading dial, the dial could affect the rotation of the airplane icon on the display, and the FMS flight path calculation again. And that's something which we see a lot also with other aircrafts, because we can see that it also is for the Primus Epic 1, or Epic 2, sorry, which has received this fix, and also some new functionality has been added. For example, they added a full array of GPWS modes. So that's pretty cool. So the Primus really received, let's say, a large update. Then the ProLine 21 integrated avionics system. This one receives a lot of fixes. Okay, you can fix wrong title, external semicolon, various layout issues, fix the index link, and it also receives those nice additions which the other, I'd say, aircraft systems received. The flight path calculation. The LTWT already exists, and also several other, I would say, warning messages. Also WPT, which stands for waypoint not matched. They added the not available in polar region. So a lot of cool things, which makes it more realistic to use this. Then the UNS 1 Echo Whiskey. This one also received the path calculation and supports flyover. Then some physics. Physics, they added a lot of, let's say, validations in it. They integrated the full interior, tensor support, more recalculation fix for specific aircrafts. And you can see that it will say it's also they say CD SDK information, right? So this is likely more for, I would say, developers which can use it, and then you as the, I would say, owner of one of these aircrafts can benefit from it. But there's more. Yes, there's more. You can see this long list, right? It's pretty long. I would say we're coming close to the end, but we're still not there. The flight system. So they fixed the en route waypoints edition discarded, as well as fix the en route waypoints edition not updating to departure arrival procedures, and they add some warning messages to the console. Then the electronic flight bag, as already mentioned in the intro, it is completely overhauled. It received a lot of new functionality, and a lot of new functionality means also a lot of bugs, and that's now being addressed. I would say a lot of them have been addressed, right? Has everything been addressed? Well, likely not, but you can see that this is the list which is there. So they fixed some approaches, fixed some auto routing issues, some ETE calculations, some, I would say, graphical issues which are fixed. They also added some new things. Always visible stopwatch. They added a private option to the airline list. They added an advisory pop-up when setting a route with VFR procedures to avionics. They added a persistent save, a custom basic performance input, and they added support for coordinates with the long and latitude are separated by a slash. And they added transition information to the procedure section summary on the route page. So a lot of cool things, a lot of new functionalities, but also a lot of fixes. Aircraft tag, input events, model behavior, and modular aircrafts. These are, I would say, all for developers, right? So we'll not go to it. But we will continue with the aircraft gameplay. The aircraft gameplay, especially the HC, we know it also always has some issues. It became even worse with Flight Simulator 2024, but there are now some fixes. For example, the IVR clearance request to be allowed while not on flight following was fixed. And also the fixed text to speech pronunciation of Asiana and Lauda Airlines. They improved the handling of takeoff without acknowledgement to takeoff clearance, right? The clearance will now be cancelled and the user can continue VFR or request a new IFR clearance. Pretty nice. And they also improved the estimations of decent point for IFR flights. So I hope that this one is definitely improved, right? Because sometimes you need to request a lower or higher altitude because else you will never make, in this case, your approach if you want to start descending. Then they also removed the legacy request IFR clearance for instrument flight panel, and it replaced it with request IFR clearance. So it's really important to understand. And they added also some improvements for the post-processing of radio effects on the ATC communications, which makes the audio sound more realistic. Support for stars and descent via star for larger aircrafts. This is really nice. I think a lot of people were waiting for this one. If you were waiting for it, let me know via the comment box below this video. And they removed the feed suffix from the spoken altitudes. Then they fixed the B and C airspace with VFR transitions, and they improved the algorithm for selecting arrival procedures, such as stars, approaches, and transitions. For those who are using the external HUD now changed the GPS altitude title from ground altitude to above ground. And there also are some fixes for the passive aircrafts. Passive aircrafts are static aircrafts which you can't use, you can't fly, but they are, I would say, available in Flight Simulator. I would say just for, I would say, to make it more realistic, where you're, I'd say, taxiing over the taxiways and see other aircrafts at the airports. A lot of fixes, mostly of them are graphical, but some of them are also interesting, let's say the wingspan, which was incorrect. Also registration numbers, which were incorrect. So that's really cool. The same thing they did for the vehicles. A lot of visual improvements for multiple trucks, like the fire short, the fuel short Europe, the large Europe, the de-icing things, the LODs for truck boarding Northam, the minibus India, and the truck catering. So a lot of fixes, also graphical fixes for, I'd say, the ground vehicles. Now we're jumping to the career mode. In the career mode, they also have added a lot of things. For example, they added incompatible aircraft to the select aircraft screen emissions with warning to indicate why they are incompatible. That's really important because previously the message wasn't that clear and you needed to figure it out yourself. They also fixed an aircraft moving during RTC, and they fixed the flow for aircraft without parking brakes. And a lot of other cool things. They add shortcuts. The tag in the briefing to better differentiate between freelance and employee missions. They add the shortcut to the next button in career mode, and they added the ability to see details of locked certifications. That's really nice because sometimes you want to say you're doubting which certification you want to do. In that case, you can have a look at it and make your plan. Besides that, also confirmation pop-ups are there. They also pop up when the player doesn't have enough credits to pay access to a certification, and a lot of fixes like the electric engine flow for career missions and certifications being fixed. An issue where the fuel wasn't properly removed. Fixed day and night icons. Replaced temperature data. They added a pop-up when the current mission has expired. And they also added a pop-up to introduce the concept of special missions. Special missions, interesting. Then there are more general bug fixes. But this list is also pretty long, right? They removed missions, they fixed career modes, they fixed the back button, they fixed in simple things like the custom title to the aircraft store delivery page. They fixed fuel levels when launching a mission with some aircrafts. They fixed an issue where the wrong aircraft livery was used in a freelancer mode. So although it's called general bug fixes, these are the bug fixes which are applicable only if you are using that, I would say, special mode in Flight Simulator, which is a career mode. Then for the free flight, they also changed some things. The back on track behavior is changed, as well as the tail plane spawning at the wrong position when launching a flight with a glider on runway. The missions, also some fixes. Move around step validation issue with VR controls, so specifically for VR, as well as a fixed regression on the reward screen for legacy missions. Adaptive activities, RTCs for VR points, as well as they fixed a black screen when crashing. In addition to that, there are some specific fixes for specific mission types, such as they added the weather dialogues, they added an exclusion area, they added failure condition, they added flight seeing. So a lot of fixes, but also some new additions, which are really cool to see. Or is there something really super cool in this? A lot. I would say too much to go to, right? Because we are just at build number 1. We didn't even discuss build number 2 and 3. For the world, there are some fixes with no vegetation, so it's Isla de Taboga. And for the airports, there are a lot of fixes. There are specific airport fixes, such as for this one, where they fixed the no aprons, they deleted some airports from the game as they are closed, which makes sense. And they also deleted some of the airports according to this thread, which is a separate thread which contains all kind of bug fixes or things which are not correct. So keep feeding them with the information, because then they can fix it. This one also, we can see that Bilbao has received a lot of fixes, and they also add some generic fixes, as it looks like. Fauna, they fixed the issue when bounding boxes animations on the fauna models. And for vegetation, they fixed the trees which sometimes disappear in large parts of Amazonia. Air traffic also received a lot of fixes. Besides the fixes which we already saw, like those static aircrafts, these are the fixes for the, I would say, not driving, but for the animated, I would say, aircrafts. In this case, they adjust a lot of things like the taxi speeds, the AI braking logic, as well as the landing AI not overshoot the taxi exit. Also better compatibility with older aircraft, such as the 2020 versions. They optimize the performance, they force live traffic model matching to only use models optimized for AI traffic. And there are some other nice things, such as the house livery of plane type, including alternates. And they alter fallback mechanism when there's no traffic available. Road trucks, also a lot of fixes. So again, this looks like to be, I would say, the same fixes that we discussed earlier, but I briefly looked at some of them, and it looks like these are in addition to the already described fixes. Then the marketplace. They fixed an issue where the number of items in upgrade notifications was incorrect, and they fixed a free upgrade notification being thrown too much during a single session. Then they added the airplane weight filter. That's really nice. And also the motorization. So you now have 2 additional filters which you can apply in a marketplace if you're searching for a specific aircraft. My library changed recommended sorting to sort a marketplace content by acquisition date. And the multiplayer has also received some new functionalities, such as the edited replication of several SimVars related to the plane dirtiness. This one, I'd say, is likely what they're using as a Sobo to, I'd say, generate more dirt or show more dirt. With that virtual reality, also tons of fixes, right? Fix the right VR controls, improve behavior, prevent vibrations, fix broken state, fix the conflict between rudder and panel zoom. Also, they add some, let's say, control fixes in that. So they add the confirmation pop-up when the preset all apply to all is clicked. And they merge the apply to all and set its default preset settings. So this is specifically for controllers, while this is only for virtual reality. Right, so keep that in mind. Also, they allow the device to be renamed and disabled, and they revoked some peripheral default profiles. Well, hopefully they didn't delete the custom profiles, but that's something which we will figure out really soonish. And also some fixes for the keyboard shortcuts, as well as the inverted axis on some peripheral default profiles. So these are simply, I would say, the default profiles which Asobo delivers as part of the simulator. Then some activities which are fixed. Runway on Flight Simulator 2020 landing challenges fixed. And there's some training fixes. Also, they had some new notifications, as you can see. But they also improved some things, like they improved the helicopter cyclic training by returning cyclic assist if a player can't handle no assist flight yet. And helicopters are pretty complex to fly with. Besides that, they also had some fixes for the helicopters mainly. And also for the F-18, they made the pilot wear jumpsuit and mask. And then we're already at the Chances series, where they added information pop-ups when the player changes between leagues. Character assets and animations, they fixed the character not teleported on a node. And the player character, they disabled the auto crouch while in VR for the avatar. The rest of the fixes are for the dev modes, if I'm correct. Yes, it is. But you can see this list. I would say it's already crazy long. But is there more? Yes, because this was only the first build. So let's go 1 page back and then look at the second build, which was released on the 5 days ago, right? On the 21st of May. It bumped up the version to version 1.5.2.0. I would say same things which are applicable. But this one is a little bit hard to read because they changed the layout. So First of all, they added some new content and features. They added a fade on images with the market item, profile briefings, activities, and HQ. So if you now visited the items, you will see that it's fading into these images instead of, let's say, trying to load them and then popping up them one by one. The home career challenges, controls, install, and Red Bull, that's also applicable to this one. So this is, I would say, the same. And it's now possible to click and drag on all the slides of the game. So interesting. They fixed some issues, fixed a potential crash. Not sure what they fixed, but hey, they fixed something. And they optimized the cabin services loading to not open the same file several times. I would say this one was already part of the previous build also, so pretty interesting. There's some general bug fixes, a lot of bug fixes where languages, where the ATIS would not appear, where the first message sent using the group chat was not displayed, city markers not visible. So you can see some, let's say, of these fixes. We just discussed them as part of the first build which was released, but looks like that they chose to, let's say, kind of replicate this more or less. So if we go to this list, we can still see some other fixes like the loading of the bitmaps. We can see the aircraft specific things like the engine oil temperature, EGT, CHT, tuned in FLT files to be more realistic. So a lot of fine tuning on the aircraft fleet, but also add some new keys such as the key parking brakes on and key parking brakes off. This is really for controllers. And they added a new tag for container, which likely is something which they can use in the future. They added the radiator temperature to the FLT files for the engine configuration. So a lot of nice things, although some of them might not be applicable directly to you, it will be available for developers, so eventually it will impact you in a positive way. Then again, the aircrafts, a lot of things. So they removed the cargo tab from the helicopter, they fixed the rain on windshields and fuselage flowing, and they updated the color order in the file. Well, that's up to them. Besides that, they also added now the FMS flight path calculation, now support on flyovers, which we saw initially only on the Skyhawk 172 and some other smaller aircrafts. They now also added it to the Boeing 737. So that's cool that they added it in this new build to this aircraft. Also, they added the realistic pull-up times when setting takeoff thrust. This was already part of the previous build. Skyhawk corrected fuselage to get the right amount of drag in side slip. New fix. The Avalanche, they fixed a lot of things like the floating parts, the aircraft disappearing, the cockpit LOD issue. I think some of them were already partially fixed, but maybe they found some more, say, circumstance whenever this occurred and they now fixed it. Flickering frost for the DG Aviation. Extra E330 LT, correct the maximum lift and stall. I think these were already in the previous, I would say, builds. For the Goomba Cabri G2, they also fixed some things, but those were also, I think they were already fixed, as well as for the Hard Aerospace ES30, they fixed the adaptive livery color and they fixed the tail white square logo in career. Besides that, you can see that in the aircraft core system, there are some things which we already discussed, so I'll go over this a little bit faster than previously. So the fuel system, we already know it, that was, I would say, being added. For the glass cockpits, we already saw that the FMS and the autopilot fix were there. So it looks like it was simply copying and pasting those, I would say, release notes, because these are all 100% the same. At least I didn't find out any differences. The same thing is for the EFB, where I also saw this behavior. And they add some new functionality, of course, but I would say release notes are, I think 99.9% the same. However, coming closer down the list, we will see some new things, such as they removed the generic passive aircraft from the game and the fixed wrong ICAO for the A319 United Airlines. Some improvements for the vehicles are there. And they added a new pop-up to inform the player that the airports have been deleted, if they are being deleted. Pretty interesting. And they also add some new pop-ups when the current mission has been expired. Again, this is, I would say, almost the same as with the previous release notes. So likely I will start to use some kind of magic AI to compare them and see what the differences are, because that's the interesting thing, right? The most interesting thing. Besides that, there are some exclusions, some fixes in the emissions pack. But again, most of them were already part of this build before, similar to this one. Camera zooming issues, this one is a new fix. Some missing details map for grass surfaces coming from Flight Simulator 2024 package. This is a new fix, and also this one is a new fix. The other one, the flight density for 2020 packages, I also do think that this one is pretty new. Scrolling down, we find more and more and more, right? 3 builds in 8 days, as mentioned already at the start of this video, results in a lot of fixes. And this is only the second build which we're going to. And you can see also here, they improved a lot of live traffic. They forced the live traffic model matching to only use the optimized AI. But this is again duplicate lines, right? So road traffic has been fixed. Virtual reality, some specific fixes. I do think that these are new, especially this one. I didn't see it earlier. Also this one is pretty new. Then the controls, they disabled the import and export presets button on the console, and they fixed some unusable actions being listed in the controls settings menu. And they also added the timer when rebinding an input. So that's also nice. Also some fixes. Specifically, they added they fixed the view mode rapidly switching from inputting cockpit external view mode at the same time. Okay, interesting. And some fix for activities. Again, 2020 content, we already knew it. They fixed some helicopter issues. Some of them were already part of the previous build. Challenges, some new things. Although I do think that both of them are the same. As well as for the character assets and animations, both of them were already there. Maybe described a little bit different. And then we've got the SDK information, which is shorter than the previous build, but still long. That's the last one. The last one, which was released, I say this Friday. So I squeezed all 3 of them in this video. So let's have a look at the stability and performance. In this case, there is a specific feature which was introduced in sim update number 3. This one is now being fixed. At least they think it's fixed. So that's likely, I would say better, right? Because they run things in parallel, which could be wrong. Could be from performance-wise, could be really nice. And they also fix a wrong usage of the resized bitmap dimensions instead of the original ones when sampling textures. That was specifically for the Xbox Series S and the PC with a low texture resolution. So very specific scenarios. Last one, they fixed a random live view leak for the WASM instruments. WASM was something which they also discussed in the developer stream and something which they likely have a separate stream on about what's being fixed and etc. Some more information. In this case, it could have an impact on the VRAM, which we all know is, I would say, something which we read a lot on the communities. General bug fixes. What do we see here? Fixed issue where the selection cursor could disappear. They fixed plane flares occlusion when using multiple windows. And they fixed an issue, incorrect occlusion of plane flares near screen edges. Resolved an artifact regression issue involving trees and fog rendering. So those are all new things. The aircraft specific things, corrected contact points for specific aircrafts, as well as they fixed the incorrect with calculation at the top of certain buildings and object structures that could happen in the Needles Landing Challenge and other places. Some minor fix for the Boeing 737 and for the Hot Aerospace ES-130, so it's really cool to see. And they also adjust the physics, but again, I do expect that you will not benefit from it directly, but indirectly you will. Flight system. They fixed some issues with the flight planning sync between the electronic flight pack, the GPS and the HC and the ribbons. And the EFB is now the panel border style sheet. Going to traffic, the air traffic, they fixed some things. The parked aircraft now better a mix of planes, because what you sometimes thought that they were all the same aircraft types, or if they were, say, similar types, they could have the same liveries. It looks like they made some change there. And they also fixed the remaining case when unoptimized models would be used for AI traffic. And this is what I mean, right? Although the fix looks like the same, it's, would say, with a little bit different variant, but they fixed it. Then they adjust the ratio of parked aircraft to respond to fixed issues that could lead to overcrowded airports, and they fixed a problem where the parked aircraft had a chance to not fully load the model and stay invisible. The rest of these fixes are, I would say, kind of, developer mode. So with these 3 builds, you can already see that they added tons of fixes, but the good news is they also added new functionality. Especially for that new functionality, I will record a complete separate video because I want to showcase that new functionality, of course. Here in this video, where we looked at the 3 builds for Sim Update number 3 Beta, which were released only in the last 8 days. So I do expect a new build being released pretty soon. Maybe somewhere Tuesday, Thursday. Let's see. Keep an eye on my channel if you want to be up to date about the latest builds and you want to be updated about the latest news about Sim Update number 3. Thanks for watching and hope to see you back next video.